As Africa enters a new era of economic promise, Political Exchange talks to presidents, government leaders, and policymakers, unpacking the political economy and explaining policy direction. Political Exchange provides the requisite business person's guide to navigating policy in Africa. Political Exchange, weeknights at 9 p.m. Central African Time, only on CNBC Africa.
To develop your business requires innovation. To lead at home requires African expertise. To compete internationally requires global information. To be first in business requires CNBC.
Hello, you're watching Economic Lifelines Nigeria. I'm Wale Famrewa. A lot has been said about how AMCON has rescued Nigerian banks and provided a fresh lease of life. But on this episode of the program, we take a look at how AMCON is engaging companies like this. Sparkware Steel. This is one of over 9,000 companies owing AMCON trillions of naira. On this episode of the program, we take a look at how AMCON is engaging companies like this to not only stay in business, but to pay back their debts. There's little doubt AMCON, Nigeria's bad bank, will go down in history as the main institution that helped stabilize Nigeria's banking sector by buying trillions of naira in bad loans from fragile banking institutions. But this legacy seems likely to transcend its impact on the financial markets. As a public institution, AMCON will also be viewed in the light of its social impact and how it affects the broader economic activities. Indeed, several critical sectors of the economy, from aviation to oil and gas and to the capital markets, are exposed to Nigeria's bad bank. AMCON's engagement with debtor companies in these sectors could determine if it will be viewed as a catalyst for economic growth and job creation, or a spanner in the works for companies already struggling under the pressure of large debts. As AMCON takes on the challenge of collecting from debtors, it has to balance any social responsibility with the reality that in a few years, it must raise trillions of naira to pay back holders of the bonds issued in exchange for bad loans.
AMCON has a funding model, and in the funding model of AMCON, it is expected that recoveries of these bad assets, of these bad loans in our books, will constitute about 25% of our funds, of our inflow. We have so far done 3 rounds of purchases of loans from the banks. We have taken in about 3.5 trillion naira worth of loans, for which we paid about 1.7 trillion naira to the banks. That represents about 44 kobo for every naira. That is the discount we have gotten for these loans. Now, the number of borrowers today stands at roughly around 12,000. Approximately about 3,000 will be individuals and 9,000 of them will be corporate bodies. Now, these borrowers, we have done a segmentation and have seen that they have cut across most of the sectors of the Nigerian economy. But the three largest sectors of the economy where these loans reside are capital market, oil and gas, both upstream and downstream, and general commerce. And these three sectors account for about 65% of the loans in our books. You know, in Nigeria, borrowers take loans from, one person can take loans from several banks. So the largest we have had is a company that took loans from about 10 banks, and the value is about 200 billion naira. Now the lowest, we have loans that are as low as 100,000 naira, but those are mostly share loans. Those workers who have been convinced to buy share loans, but somehow along the line, maybe they lost their jobs or they lost the capacity to repay those loans, and the banks sold those loans to us.
One of the over 9,000 corporates owing AMCON is Sparkwest Steel. Debt-ridden, this startup company struggled for years under the pressure created by a weak financing structure that left it owing several banks billions of naira, debts that were ultimately transferred to AMCON.
Sparkwest is the pioneer manufacturer in Nigeria of fabricated and galvanized structural steel for the telecommunication and power sectors. A lot of the cell sites that you see and the power transmission lines are things that Sparkwest is able to produce in Nigeria. Sparkwest, prior to AMCON's intervention, had been financed by a syndicate of 5 banks, and AMCON, in collaboration with one of the 5, Access Bank, restructured the debts. Of course, AMCON took over the obligations of all the other syndicate members, barring Access, and in collaboration with Access Bank, did a comprehensive restructuring of the company. Prior to the restructuring, the company was indebted to the tune of about 54 billion naira. The AMCON and Access Bank intervention reduced the debt obligations to about 36.5 billion, resulted in the conversion of some debts into redeemable preference shares, which are now held by AMCON. And it therefore created equity where there was none. So where we had a basket case balance sheet before, now we have a balance sheet of a company that has a fighting chance, a real fighting chance in the market. New equity has been subscribed to, and in addition to that, additional financing to the tune of about $50 million has been provided in terms of working capital facilities for the company to operate.
We have realized that there are some companies that can do well given some changes in the conditions of their loans. Sparkwest represents one such example whereby the burden of the loan is such that it was mostly the banks gave them a short-term loan, what they needed was a long-tenured loan. So what we had to do was to restructure it into a long-tenured facility. Now there was the issue of even debt service capacity. We realized that given that it is an upstart company, that they cannot afford to pay the principal and the interest all at once. So we did some conversion. We converted some of the loan into equity, introduced better corporate governance in that company, and in the process also we realized that they needed more working capital, and because now we are sure that we have introduced stronger corporate governance, we can now help them to have access to more working capital facility.
AMCON's engagement with debtors like Sparkwest Steel must surprise many observers, given the rhetoric from the central bank and AMCON itself about a determination to collect from debtors. After AMCON was set up in 2010,